Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm really glad you're joining us today. We're going to get into something pretty fascinating, a compound that's really carving out its own space in metabolic health research. We are diving deep into Tesamorelin. And to help us navigate all this, we're incredibly fortunate to have an accomplished endocrinologist and peptide researcher with us. It's genuinely great to have your expertise here.
Oh, thank you for having me. Tesamorelin is definitely a compelling topic. I'm excited to unpack, why it's getting so much research attention, especially around visceral fat, metabolism, and even healthy aging.
Absolutely. So the mission today really is to explore tesamorelin. It's this, well, sophisticated synthetic version of growth hormone-releasing hormone, GHRH. We want to dig into what makes it unique and why it's become such a key player in research. So let's jump right in. Its structure. It's known for precision, right? Can you maybe start with the key changes, the tweaks that give it that stability compared to, the GHRH our body makes naturally?
That's a great place to start. Precision and stability, they're key. So tesamorelin is, at its core, a synthetic peptide, an analog of human GHRH. Structurally, it's actually the full 44 amino acid sequence of human GHRH. That's important because, well, that sequence is basically the natural key for the body's GHRH receptors. But the real innovation, the tweak, as you called it, is this added group, a trans-3-hexanoic acid group, right at the N-terminus.
Okay, the N-terminus. So for those of us maybe not deep in peptide chemistry, what's the big deal with that modification? Was it just about making it last longer, or did it kind of change how we could even use GHRH therapy?
No, it's much more than just lasting longer, although that's part of it. It was a pretty significant step in peptide design. Its main job is to make tesamorelin much more stable. See, our natural GHRH, it gets broken down really fast. There's this enzyme everywhere called DPPIV, dipeptidyl peptidase 4E. It just chops off the first two amino acids at that N-terminus, and boom, GHRH is inactive. By adding that trans-3-hexanoic acid group, tesamorelin basically shields itself, becomes much more resistant to that DPPIV attack.
Oh, okay, so it's like a little protective cap.
Exactly. And what that means, practically speaking, is a longer half-life. It stays active in the bloodstream for longer, works more effectively. This wasn't just a minor improvement. It really opened the door to using GHRH stimulation as a real therapeutic strategy. Before, the rapid breakdown made it tough. This tweak allowed for consistent but still physiological nudging of the growth hormone system without needing constant high doses that could cause problems. It lets us use the body's own pathway, but in a more controlled way. And this peptide, it was developed by Thera Technologies up in Montreal. Its big moment came in 2010 with FDA approval. That approval was very specific for HIV-associated lipodystrophy, specifically reducing that extra belly fat, the visceral fat, in HIV patients. So it fits into the GHRH analog group, sometimes called growth hormone secretagogues, but its mechanism is distinct. The goal is targeted enhancement of the body's own GH and IGF-1 system for benefits in body composition and metabolism, focusing on that visceral fat.
Got it. So it's not just hitting the system with a hammer. It's more like a precisely made key, designed to work with the body's own machinery. That sounds much smarter. So with this engineered peptide, how does it actually, conduct the orchestra of our metabolism? Is it just flooding us with growth hormone, or is it more subtle?
Oh, definitely more subtle. It's a nuanced dance, really. That's the elegance of it. It's not just about flooding the system. On a molecular level, tesamorelin binds very specifically to those GHRH receptors. They're mainly on certain cells in the pituitary gland, the somatotrophs. When tesamorelin hits these receptors, it tells the pituitary, okay, release some growth hormone. But, and this is absolutely critical, the release isn't constant. It's physiologic and pulsatile.
Pulsatile. Okay, I hear that term a lot in endocrinology.
Yeah.
Why is that rhythm so important? Maybe an analogy might help grasp it.
Absolutely. Pulsatility is fundamental in hormone signaling, especially for GH. Think of tesamorelin like a metabolic conductor. It doesn't just blast a constant GH horn. Instead, it cues these short-timed GH notes, like a conductor leading an orchestra in rhythmic bursts. Each pulse is a specific signal.
Okay, a conductor. I like that.
Or maybe even better, like a smart thermostat for your GH system. Instead of just cranking the heat way up and leaving it, tesamorelin boosts GH in measured pulses. It mimics the body's natural rhythm. This helps balance energy use, fat burning, tissue repair, without, overheating the system or messing up other pathways like continuous exposure might. Continuous stimulation can actually make cells less responsive over time, receptor desensitization. They sort of tune out the signal, but pulses maintain that sensitivity.
That makes sense. Keep the system responsive.
Exactly. So once this natural pulse GH is released, it travels around, acts on the liver, muscle, fat tissue. A key downstream effect is boosting insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, mostly from the liver. IGF-1 does a lot of GH's building work, anabolic effects, cell growth. And IGF-1 is also crucial for feedback. It tells the pituitary and hypothalamus, okay, easy does it, helping regulate the whole system, preventing too much GH. It's a self-balancing loop.
Feedback loop, right. Keeps things in check.
Precisely. So physiologically, these pulsed increases in GH and IGF-1 lead to targeted changes. GH itself is interesting. It's anabolic, builds tissue, but it's also strongly lipolytic. It breaks down fat. But here's the really key part, the selectivity. GH preferentially breaks down visceral fat, that deep belly fat, while helping to keep lean body mass. That's quite remarkable.
Wow, so it goes after that internal, risky belly fat specifically without just randomly burning all fat or muscle. That's a huge difference.
Exactly. It encourages the body to use that specific internal fat for energy. Visceral fat is different, metabolically more active, more inflammatory, more GH receptors. So targeting it is key. It's not just shrinking any fat cell, it's using those specific stores. And meanwhile, IGF-1 helps with muscle protein synthesis, general metabolic function. And again, because it amplifies the body's own pulses, it generally keeps levels within a normal range. That's a big difference from direct GH therapy, which can push levels way too high, causing side effects.
The smart thermostat idea really clicks.
Yeah.
And does that pulsing rhythm also help avoid the receptors getting, like, tired out, which happens with constant hormone signals? And just to be super clear for everyone listening, maybe briefly explain visceral adiposity in health terms and why that IGF-1 feedback is so essential.
Yes, good point. The pulsing absolutely helps prevent receptor desensitization. It keeps the GHRH receptors responsive, preventing them from getting overwhelmed by a constant signal, maintains effectiveness. And to clarify, visceral adiposity is that fat deep inside your abdomen, around your organs. Not the stuff you can pinch, it's the apple-shaped fat. Metabolically, it's much more dangerous. It pumps out inflammatory stuff, messes with insulin, lipids, raises risks for heart disease, type 2 diabetes. So targeting it is really important for health. And IGF-1 feedback. That's one of the body's internal checks and balances. GH goes up, stimulates IGF-1, IGF-1 levels rise, and they signal back to the pituitary and hypothalamus to slow down GH release. It stops the system from going overboard, a self-regulating mechanism for balance, for homeostasis.
Okay, that's super clear. Really highlights the delicate balance.
Yeah.
So now we know what it is and how it works so carefully.
Yeah.
Let's talk about where it made its biggest mark initially. That application in HIV-associated lipodystrophy, that really seemed to establish its value, didn't it?
Yeah.
Can you walk us through the clinical side of that?
Absolutely. This is where Tesamorelin really proved its worth. HIV-associated lipodystrophy is a tough condition. People, often on long-term antiretroviral therapy, get this abnormal fat distribution. A major part is too much visceral fat building up in the abdomen that's HIV lipohypertrophy. And it's not just about appearance, though. That seriously affects quality of life. This belly fat is linked to serious metabolic problems, insulin resistance, high triglycerides, bad cholesterol profiles, higher cardiovascular risk. It's a major health burden for these patients.
Right, it's much more than just cosmetic.
Definitely. And tesamorelin's effectiveness here was shown really clearly in several strong clinical trials. Let's look at a key one, a 26-week randomized placebo-controlled trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Big deal study. Patients getting daily tesamorelin, 2 milligrams injected under the skin, they saw about a 15% drop in their visceral adipose tissue, or VAT, from baseline. Compare that to the placebo group, they actually saw their VAT increase by about 5% over that time. And this wasn't just someone eyeing it. It was measured precisely with CT scans, objective proof of the targeted effect. That was huge.
15% reduction versus a 5% increase. That's a stark difference.
It really is. And beyond just the fat reduction, the trials showed significant metabolic improvements too. Patients on tesamorelin had their fasting triglycerides drop by around 50 milli-GDL on average. Placebo group, slight increase. They also saw improvements in the total cholesterol to HDL good cholesterol ratio. That's an important marker for heart risk. And IGF-1 levels, they went up as expected by about 80%. But, and this is crucial for safety, they stayed within the normal physiological range. They didn't shoot up into risky territory.
Okay, that's reassuring. What about blood sugar? That's often a concern with things affecting growth hormone.
Great question. And maybe one of the most reassuring findings was that over the 6 months, there were no significant differences in average fasting blood glucose or insulin levels between the tesamorelin and placebo groups. This is super important for HIV patients, as many already deal with glucose issues from the virus or treatments. And, from the patient's view, they reported improved body image, less abdominal girth. That correlated with the fat loss and definitely boosted their quality of life.
That connection between the visible changes and the hidden metabolic improvements is really powerful. So for someone living with this, it's not just looking better, but actually improving key health numbers that matter for the long run.
Exactly. It's a holistic benefit. The visible change helps psychosocially, which is vital. But the metabolic shifts lower triglycerides, better cholesterol ratios, stable glucose. Those are arguably even more impactful for long-term health. They can lower the risk factors for heart disease, a
Yeah.
huge issue in the aging HIV population. And doing it without messing up blood sugar, which other treatments sometimes do, really highlights its good risk-benefit profile in this group. It's a comprehensive advantage.
That makes the whole sticking with its aspect seem even more critical. What did the research find about using it longer than 6 months? And what happens if someone stops? Do the benefits last?
That's a really important point. Longer-term studies, going up to a year or more, gave us key insights. They confirmed that if you stay on tesamorelin, you maintain that visceral fat reduction. For instance, in a 52-week follow-up, people who kept taking it held on to and even slightly improved their initial fat loss, reaching about an 18% decrease from baseline overall. But, and this is the critical observation you hinted at, for patients who were switched from tesamorelin to a placebo after 6 months, their visceral fat bounced back pretty quickly. It headed right back towards baseline levels within just a few months.
So it's not a permanent fix for the fat itself. It's more like ongoing management. You need to keep taking it to keep the benefit.
Exactly. That's the major implication. Ongoing treatment is necessary to maintain the effect. It controls the fat accumulation. It doesn't permanently reverse the underlying tendency. It's like managing high blood pressure or cholesterol. The medication works as long as you take it. This is vital for patients to understand. Another really key finding from these studies was tesamorelin's selectivity. The visceral fat reduction was remarkably specific. Subcutaneous fat, the fat under the skin on limbs or the face, was mostly spared. This is huge. It means it avoids lipoatrophy, that unwanted, sometimes disfiguring fat loss in the face or limbs.
Right, that was a big problem with older approaches, wasn't it?
A massive problem. Lipoatrophy was a major side effect, often intolerable, with earlier, less specific or higher dose direct GH attempts for lipodystrophy. Those also came with lots of other systemic side effects. Tesamorelin, by using these more physiological pulses, seems to sidestep those issues beautifully. More targeted, much better tolerated. It was a real step forward in peptide design, showing you could get targeted effects without widespread collateral damage.
That makes perfect sense. Precision matters.
It really does. And reducing visceral fat in HIV patients might have even broader benefits. We know visceral fat is linked to higher liver fat and cardiovascular risk. So researchers looked specifically at non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, in HIV patients with visceral fat buildup. A 2014 trial did this. The results were pretty encouraging. After 6 months, liver fat, measured accurately by MRI, dropped by a median of 2.0% in the tesamorelin group. It actually went up slightly in the placebo group. The net difference was about a negative 2.9% reduction in liver fat fraction. Modest, yes, but statistically significant. It suggests tesamorelin might help with fatty liver in this population.
And fatty liver is a growing concern, right?
A big concern, especially for long-term HIV survivors. It's linked to advanced liver disease and heart problems. Now, in that specific liver fat study, there was a brief temporary rise in blood sugar early on, but by 6 months, glucose levels were similar between the groups. Again, generally neutral on glucose control overall. So it's worth stressing again. Tesamorelin is the only therapy approved in the U.S. specifically for this excess belly fat in HIV. The hypothesis is that by reducing this inflammatory visceral fat, tesamorelin might indirectly cut cardiovascular and liver risks. It's a logical idea. But, and this is a really important, but long-term outcomes, like actually proving fewer heart attacks or strokes, haven't been definitively shown yet. That needs more, bigger, longer studies. The risk factor data is strong, but the final proof on hard outcomes is still being researched.
That distinction between risk factors and hard outcomes is crucial. Still, what's striking is that it's a sustained management tool, not a one-off fix. And that precision hitting visceral fat but sparing subcutaneous sounds like incredibly smart biological design. It really avoided the problems of just flooding the system.
That's a great way to put it. Working with the body systems often leads to better, more sustainable results than just overriding them.
Exactly. And speaking of working with the body, the research seems to be branching out now, beyond HIV, looking into things like healthy aging, even cognition. That feels like a huge leap. How did scientists connect the dots from fat metabolism to brain health and aging? What's the thinking there?
Yeah, that's where things get really intriguing, connecting to the bigger picture. We know that as people get older, growth hormone levels naturally decline the somatopause,
Hmm.
and this decline is often linked to things many associate with aging. More visceral fat, less muscle mass and strength sarcopenia, and even subtle cognitive shifts, like finding planning or remembering things a bit harder. So given that tesamorelin can safely boost GH and IGF-1 in a physiological way, researchers thought, well, could it maybe counteract some of these age-related changes? Could it help mimic a more youthful hormonal state?
Makes logical sense. Test the hypothesis.
Exactly. And one really interesting trial looked at this in older adults, average age around 68. It was a 20-week randomized controlled study, 152 people, some healthy, some with mild cognitive impairment, MCI. They took either 1 milligram tesamorelin or a placebo each night, and the cognitive results were quite promising, offering a new angle. Compared to placebo, the tesamorelin group showed significant improvement in executive functions. That's things like planning, attention, mental flexibility, problem solving. There was also a positive trend in verbal memory.
Wow. Improvement in executive function. That's not trivial.
Not at all. What was really striking was that the healthy older adults on tesamorelin seemed to improve beyond their starting point, and those with MCI showed a slower cognitive decline than expected. It wasn't just slowing decline, it hinted at potential enhancement in some areas.
That's fascinating. So potentially enhancing function, not just preserving it.
It's very intriguing. And these brain benefits seemed linked to the hormonal changes. IGF-1 levels went up significantly, reaching levels more typical of younger adults. They increased about 117% from baseline in the tesamorelin group. Crucially, though, they stayed within the upper end of the normal physiological range. The thinking is that IGF-1 has neuroprotective effects, supports neurons, synaptic connections, maybe even new neuron growth, and that might contribute to these cognitive gains. It's a strong link between a metabolic hormone and brain function.
A brain-body connection mediated by hormones.
Precisely. And the study also looked at body composition in these older folks. Similar to the HIV studies, tesamorelin led to about a 7.4% reduction in total body fat percentage over 20 weeks. Again, most of that lost fat was visceral fat. This points to a potential role in tackling that age-related belly fat accumulation, which is a major risk factor for metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and heart disease in the general older population.
So similar body composition effects, but in a different group.
Yes, but, and it's a big but, we absolutely have to stress these are investigational uses. Tesamorelin is not approved for cognitive enhancement or general age-related obesity outside of the HIV context. The early data is compelling, yes, suggesting potential metabolic and maybe even neurological benefits, but much more research is needed, longer, larger trials to confirm everything. For example, does it help with fatty liver in non-HIV individuals? Logical question. And what about combining it with exercise in older adults? Could that boost muscle function, metabolism even more? So while its main approved use is still HIV-related belly fat, its ability to mimic a younger hormonal profile has definitely opened up exciting avenues for research in broader aging and metabolic health areas.
That is really fascinating. Moving beyond just fat into aging, the brain, it really underscores how interconnected everything is, which makes me wonder, how does tesamorelin, this kind of precision instrument, compare to other ways people try to influence growth hormone? Are there other tools in the box, and what are the pros and cons?
That's a great question for context. It helps place tesamorelin correctly. It's one specific strategy in a bigger field. Let's compare a few things. First, let's contrast tesamorelin, the GHRH analog, with ghrelin mimetic secretagogues. Things like ipamorelin, GHRP2, GHRP6, hexerelin. The key difference is the receptor they hit. Tesamorelin uses the GHRH receptor. Ghrelin mimetics use a different one, the GHSR1A receptor. Because they use different receptors, they trigger different internal signals and can have different effects. For example, ghrelin mimetics often strongly stimulate appetite. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone, after all. That's not really a main effect of tesamorelin. Ghrelin mimetics might also affect other pituitary hormones like cortisol or prolactin more, leading to different side effects. Tesamorelin's action is more purely focused on mimicking the natural GHRH signal for pulsatile GH release, arguably cleaner in that specific way.
Okay, so different mechanisms, potentially different side effects and impacts, like on hunger.
Exactly. Now compare tesamorelin to just giving straight exogenous GH-injecting growth hormone itself, often leading to continuous high levels. Here, tesamorelin has a big advantage. As we've said, it stimulates physiologic pulses of the body's own GH. This pulsatile pattern is more natural, more selective. Direct, high-dose GH historically caused lots of problems. Side effects mimicking acromegaly, like swelling, severe joint pain, carpal tunnel, insulin resistance, high blood sugar, even high blood pressure.
Right, the side effects sounded pretty rough.
They could be. And direct GH often caused non-selective fat loss, including that unwanted facial or limb fat loss, lipoatrophy. Tesamorelin, with its gentle nudge approach, gets more physiological GH increases, resulting in far fewer of those widespread, harsh side effects. It's just a more refined, biologically smarter approach.
More finesse, less brute force.
That's a good way to think about it. And just to round out the picture, there are other GHRH analogs too. Some are designed to be longer acting, like CJC1295, often using things like a drug affinity complex or DC to make them last longer, maybe needing fewer injections. There are also oral ghrelin mimetics, like ibutamorin. Big advantage being a pill, not an injection, but again, different mechanism, different profile. Even tesamorelin itself has newer formulations being looked at, like tesamorin F8, trying to make it easier to take. The main takeaway is that tesamorelin represents a move towards using the body's own pathways precisely. It holds a unique spot as a targeted option for specific situations, moving away from broad hormonal blasts towards more sophisticated modulation.
That really clarifies its position.
Mm.
It does sound like it found a kind of sweet spot, getting GH benefits without the major downsides of just flooding the system by focusing on that natural signaling rhythm.
I think that's fair to say. It's a result of smart peptide engineering and understanding the physiology, which of course leads right back to the crucial question. How does that specific physiological approach affect its safety and tolerability?
Exactly. Modulating hormones is serious business. Safety has to be front and center.
Hmm.
What does the overall research picture tell us about how well tesamorelin is tolerated given its targeted action?
Right, safety is absolutely paramount. And looking across all the studies, the picture is pretty consistent. Overall, tesamorelin has been well tolerated in trials up to a year, sometimes longer. Most side effects reported were mild to moderate. Importantly, researchers haven't seen signs of organ damage or serious irreversible problems linked directly to it so far.
Like as baseline reassurance.
It is. And a major area, glucose metabolism, how it affects blood sugar, has generally stayed stable in the overall group studied. Multiple trials, 6 to 12 months long, found no significant difference in average fasting glucose or HbA1c compared to placebo. Now, some individuals did report temporary blood sugar spikes early on, but these usually leveled out and the group averages were stable. In fact, as mentioned in the big HIV trials, there were positive changes in triglycerides and a small drop in LDL cholesterol, suggesting overall favorable metabolic effects on average.
Okay, so generally stable glucose with maybe some individual variation early on. What about common side effects people might experience?
The common things are pretty much what you might expect from a daily injection and a mild physiological GH boost. Injection site reactions are common, some redness, itching, maybe mild soreness right where you inject it. Some people report mild peripheral edema, slight fluid retention, maybe some ankle or hand swelling. And compared to placebo, more people on tesamorelin reported transient joint pain, arthralgia, or stiffness, and muscle aches, myalgia. These are known effects of higher GH levels, but they were generally mild and often got better over time. A few people reported mild stomach issues like diarrhea, but crucially, no signs of major organ damage or widespread hormone disruption beyond the intended IGF-1 increase. Thyroid, adrenal function, all consistently unaffected, and again, those IGF-1 increases stayed within the physiological range. That's key to its better safety profile compared to older GH therapies.
Right, but are there specific warnings or people who shouldn't use it?
Yes, definitely. There are important cautions. While average glucose is stable, tesamorelin can reduce insulin sensitivity in some people. The labels and studies warn it might cause glucose intolerance or raise the risk of type 2 diabetes, especially in people already predisposed. So regular monitoring of fasting glucose and HbA1c is recommended, particularly if someone has other diabetes risk factors. It's also strictly contraindicated in pregnancy, potential harm to the fetus. And in people with active cancer, theoretical concern, GHIGF1 could fuel growth. Also, certain pituitary disorders are contraindications. So overall, the safety profile is generally seen as manageable. Most common effects tend to fade. No long-term red flags like increased cancer rates have popped up so far in surveillance. But caution, regular check-ins with a doctor, and careful individual assessment are always essential. It is modulating a major hormone axis.
Okay, so generally reassuring profile, but with important caveats and the need for monitoring, especially around glucose and in specific groups. That makes sense?
No.
Which brings us to the future. What are the big questions researchers are still trying to answer? Where does the research go from here?
The frontier. There are always more questions. A big one is the lack of really long-term controlled data, especially outside the HIV population. We have good data for a year or two, but the effects of decades of even slightly higher, albeit physiological, GHIGF1 aren't fully known. Is there any theoretical risk over decades, say, for malignancy or metabolic issues? No evidence yet, but we need very long-term studies and registries to be sure. That takes huge time and resources.
Decades-long studies.
Yeah.
That's a commitment.
Absolutely. Another question is duration. Since the benefits reverse when you stop, how long do people need to take it? Is it lifelong for sustained benefit, like other chronic meds? That has big practical and cost implications. Then the broader applications. The data on non-HIV, fatty liver, aging, cognition, exciting, but needs bigger trials for solid proof. Will those cognitive hints translate to real-world delays in dementia? That's a high bar. Research combining it with exercise is also ongoing. Can they work together for even better results in muscle, function, metabolism?
It makes sense to explore combinations.
And then there's cost and practicality. Daily injections are a barrier for many. That's driving research into easier formulations, longer acting shots, maybe even pills or patches someday, though that's harder. And finally, real-world outcomes. We need more large studies looking at whether modifying these risk factors actually leads to fewer heart attacks, strokes, liver failures long-term. So the big question guiding future research is, how do we answer these critical questions to potentially expand the use of such a targeted therapy safely and effectively? It's a constant process of discovery.
Well, this has been just incredibly insightful, really a deep dive into Tesamorelin, from the molecules right up to the clinical impact and what's next. Thank you so much for sharing all that expertise, for making complex stuff so clear, and for highlighting just how significant this research is.
Oh, it was my pleasure entirely. It's a really fascinating area, and I enjoyed discussing it in this depth.
And for you, listening in, just to wrap up the core idea, Tesamorelin is this precision tool using targeted GHRH signals to get physiological GH pulses. It's proven itself in reducing that risky visceral fat in HIV with real metabolic benefits. And the really exciting part is the ongoing research looking at healthy aging, metabolism more broadly, even cognition. It's a field carefully balancing amazing potential with the need for more solid research to answer those remaining big questions. Tesamorelin really shows how smartly working with the GHI-GF1 system using these nuanced physiological methods could be a powerful way to help optimize health and maybe even healthy aging. Okay, before we sign off, just a necessary reminder, the mentioned products and peptides are not intended to refer to any peptides or products sold by Power Peptides. Products sold are strictly for research purposes and not intended for human consumption. Thank you again. It was fantastic having you.
Thank you for the great conversation.
And thank you for tuning in to the Deep Dive. If you enjoyed getting into the science today, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration. Until then, take care.